Starfield's first DLC expansion, Shattered Space, is set to offer players a new story full of content focused on House Var'uun, the enigmatic faction who, sadly, played a very small role in the base game. They are, undoubtedly, an important part of the universe's story though, and one of the most interesting and unique factions in Starfield. So this expansion definitely has the potential to offer some of the best story content in the game. While we don't know a great deal about House Var'uun and the great serpent they worship, there are plenty of details scattered throughout the settled systems which can help us know what to expect from this expansion. And Bethesda's short preview of the Var'uun homeworld and the story of Shattered Space offers several hints at the central quest, and many other secrets in quiet whispers and snippets of gameplay. Even though we're still left with plenty of questions, I think I've found a few concrete answers to share with you ahead of release, along with lots of theories and speculation. What is the mysterious power stirring in the city of Dazra? What cosmic threat are we going to face? And what on earth has happened to Anasco Var'uun? Before we attempt to answer any of those questions though, let's first remind ourselves of what we know about the Great Serpent and its loyal followers.
There is no record of a star station in this orbit. Something is not right.
In Starfield's base game, there is not a lot of House Var'uun. It's clear that they always intended for this faction to be the star of their own expansion, and their inherently mysterious nature has definitely worked in Bethesda's favour to build hype in the community for Shattered Space. It's worth considering what House Var'uun there is in the game though, to help us learn what this faction stands for and what we can expect from them in this DLC. The Vanguard Orientation Hall in New Atlantis gives us a simple history of House Var'uun, which is best described as something between a theocracy and a cult. It was formed by a man named var'uun, who was a passenger on a United Colonies ship which had, apparently, gone missing, when he bore witness to a divine being known as the Great Serpent during a grav jump. Please enjoy this artist's rendition of the Great Serpent here. Apparently, this Great Serpent told Jinan that it was, eventually, planning on revealing itself and shrouding the entire universe, leaving only the faithful. Around 40 years later, House Var'uun emerged from the shadows as an advanced and sizable society, with Jinan as its leader. While seemingly peaceful at first, they ultimately declared war against the United Colonies and the Freestar Collective in what became known as the Serpent's Crusade. Finally, in 2263, after the death of Jinan Var'uun, they sued for peace and tried to reintegrate themselves into polite society, including having an embassy in New Atlantis. At the conclusion of the Colony War in 2311, however, they abruptly left the settled systems, retreating into the shadows once again, and leaving only a few of their people behind to keep tabs on things. And that brings us to 2330, when Starfield is set, with House Var'uun still essentially in hiding. So what traces of their existence are there to be found in the base game then? Well, for a start, you can actually choose to be a former or current serpent worshipper, with the Serpent's Embrace trait in the character creator. It's worth noting though, interestingly enough, that this trait very specifically says that you grew up worshipping the Great Serpent and not that you were part of House Var'uun, because they are a different thing. This is something I only noticed recently, and I've been racking my brain trying to remember if there are any instances where, with this trait, you specifically mention having lived among House Var'uun, because I don't think there actually are. And in that case, it seems like they're suggesting you just found yourself in a weird situation where you were raised loving the Great Serpent outside of Var'uun territory. That would certainly make it a lot easier to accommodate this trait in this DLC, and it goes a long way to explaining why Andrasia never quite considers you a true believer. Anyway, as much as it seems like this trait would be a good source of House Var'uun lore throughout a playthrough, it doesn't tell us a lot. Most likely the best source of House Var'uun details, though, is the true serpent worshipper herself, Andrasia. If you spend enough time with her as your companion, and so long as you don't become a psychopathic maniac, she will begin divulging some vague personal details and eventually enlist your help in tracking down some old friends that she apparently abandoned in the middle of battle. And yes, learning that she abandoned some of her buddies a few years back does make you wonder if you've made the best choice of travelling companion. Anyway, things happen, and although it's not the most exciting quest, it's worth doing to learn more about Andrasia and House Var'uun. It seemed pretty obvious to me and everyone else from the beginning that Andrasia was part of House Var'uun, but it still takes her a while to reveal that she worships the Great Serpent. Andrasia's loyalty quest culminates in a meeting with Tomasar, who is apparently her only means of contacting House Var'uun and has acted as her handler for the duration of her stay in the settled systems, working on their behalf. At this point, Tomasar can live or die, but regardless of the outcome, Andrasia remains loyal to House Var'uun. She might question how they will feel about her, or wonder whether she will ever be able to return, but she stays a believer and is only upset with Tomasar specifically for his betrayal. What this tells us then is that this little Tomasar episode, whether completed by the player or not, is likely a self-contained incident which won't impact Shattered Space in a big way, but rather can only offer us small clues. Obviously, like Nick Valentine with Far Harbor, Andrasia will still be the best companion to take along with you for this DLC, if she's not more directly involved in the story beyond that. We can hear her voice at the start of the Shattered Space trailer, I think, so I hope there's a lot of Andrasia specific content, but we'll see. I also hope, by the way, that we're actually able to become a member of House Var'uun and a true serpent worshipper. The other obvious House Var'uun presence in the game is the ambassador who stays behind at the embassy in New Atlantis, and who you can encounter during the Vanguard faction questline, after venturing through the decaying var'uun embassy. This whole sequence is probably the most indicative of the gameplay vibe we might expect from Shattered Space, because the plants in the embassy were taken from their homeworld, and so should show up around Dazra too. Certainly the aesthetic here translates well to that homeworld, and I hope it suggests that we'll see more atmospheric horror like this in Shattered Space as well. There are a couple of other small characters in Starfield from House Var'uun, but their greatest presence by far comes in the form of the House Var'uun Zealots. In gameplay, they are essentially a rare variant of spacers, pirates, or mercs, showing up in random encounters as well as in a few key story moments. And story-wise, they also don't tell us a lot about their faction. While they ostensibly follow the teachings of Jinan Var'uun, they're clearly more interested in killing everything in sight, and they don't act directly on behalf of House Var'uun. Rather, they seem to be holdouts from the Serpent's Crusade who refuse to accept the peace agreements. Andrasia certainly isn't keen on them either. All that said, I do think there's a chance that this obvious division between violent and non-violent House Var'uun members could be central to the conflict in Shattered Space, which I'll get into later. Suffice it to say then that the most important details we can glean from Starfield's base game are that House Var'uun is a divided people with some closely guarded secrets and a faith based on some seriously wacky cosmic stuff. But there's a lot more to learn from the brief Shattered Space trailer. Bethesda's short preview of the Shattered Space DLC has a ton of details to offer us, even if it does leave a lot of questions unanswered. As they describe the expansion across their marketing materials, the story emerges from a mysterious power stirring in the city of Dazra on House Var'uun's hidden homeworld. Players will go on to investigate a terrifying cosmic threat as they explore a new planet and find unique weapons, gear, and spacesuits. From the get-go, I think it's safe to say, based on the footage shown and this description, that while the DLC will start with the space station, it will take place almost entirely on the var'uun homeworld. Though it's difficult to get a sense of how large the city of Dazra itself is here, I'd expect it to be closer to Cydonia than New Atlantis, but with a much larger and more interesting surrounding area. We're shown many different locations with landscapes which look very similar and frequently see this spire from different angles. It seems pretty clear then that players who wanted a bigger, more fleshed out and more traditional Bethesda open world map are getting their wish here. At the very least, we know it wouldn't make sense to have United Colonies survey stations around this planet, so every location shown here has to be House var'uun specific somehow. The relative lack of ship stuff past the opening of this trailer would also seem to indicate that this is an expansion focused a lot more on on-the-ground stuff. In this preview, we see glimpses of a couple of new characters, but we don't see any specific NPC interactions, nor do we see large crowds like we do in New Atlantis or Aquila City. I'm sure we can expect a few side quests and interactions here in Dazra beyond the main story, but it's impossible to tell the extent of such content at this stage. My hope is that the type of stories Bethesda can tell here will necessarily feel distinct from what we've already seen though, given the new setting. I'm not expecting a lot of friendly quest givers here though, because it certainly doesn't seem like the var'uun capital is in a good condition here. Given that Tomasar in the base game is supposedly still communicating with the High Council, and based on some of the voiceover in the trailer, it seems like the High Council is still intact though, even if their leader isn't. And of course, given how Andrasia has described her homeworld as pretty inhospitable, it's always possible that this is the best that Dazra has ever looked, and there just aren't that many House var'uun people around. At several points in this preview, we see these peculiar ghost-like figures, as well as ghostly creatures, and these are likely related to the new cosmic threat we'll be facing in Shattered Space, if not the primary villains themselves. The combination of lab areas, things like this huge satellite laser array, and this anomalous space station, would suggest to me that House var'uun have been experimenting with something dangerous, and these ghostly forms could be the result of that. Given that Janan Var'uun's encounter with the Great Serpent arose during a grav jump, it would make sense that their scientists would be working to recreate the conditions that led to that incident and bring back the Great Serpent. I'm guessing then that this is some sort of House var'uun research space station where something has gone seriously wrong while attempting to commune with the Great Serpent. Some sort of process which we might be seeing here on the Star Station has been designed to do something comparable to the temples that players can find all over the universe, interfacing life with a great cosmic power beyond our understanding. The several creatures shown in the preview which look to display a similar ethereal ghostly effect are probably test subjects of some kind. Their appearance actually reminds me most of the way NPCs look when using the Sense Star Stuff ability, as if what we're looking at here is just the star stuff. Whatever these humanoid forms are, they seem to be made of cosmic matter and not physical stuff. It wouldn't surprise me to learn that they're connected to the Starborn in some other way too. One image in the preview specifically, which mirrors other shots of the player character looking out at the world, leads me to believe that the player themselves will end up going through this process. There's a good chance too that that process involves another unknown artifact which we interact with in the same way as we do with all the others. It might be that this ghostly form manifests more as a means of fighting this cosmic threat, or perhaps it's some kind of interdimensional sickness. But whatever the case, I'm intrigued. We see these bright bluish metallic blobs throughout the Star Station too, like some sort of leaking cosmic matter, and I suspect this relates back somehow to these hazy pockets of refracted light which can be seen here on the var'uun homeworld. It appears as though these are bubbles of low or no gravity, as there are shots of the player floating through these while normal gravity seems to be present elsewhere. And this could be a seriously cool mechanic, being able to shift between these low gravity bubbles to get around the planet. Though the incredible images of the var'uun homeworld will inspire a lot of theories, the most concrete details I could gather from this trailer came from what can be heard. Near the start of the trailer, as we see the star station, a disembodied voice can be heard whispering several things.
This is the serpent's will.
Anasco var'uun is, or at least was, the leader of House Var'uun, and likely a descendant of Jinan himself. And the Scaled Citadel is the structure at the centre of Dazra and the seat of power from which House Var'uun is ruled. Given those facts, it sounds like we're being told exactly what we'll be getting up to in Shattered Space, saving Anasco and restoring the Citadel. As for who or what is talking and asking to be taken home, I don't quite know, but I'd love to hear some theories. We know that there has almost always been division amongst the followers of the Great Serpent. It's strange that they started off wanting to be peaceful before suddenly turning violent and starting the Serpent's crusade. And it's weird too that there are so many House Var'uun zealots still wandering the settled systems. It wouldn't be surprising to learn that there's a great deal of division on their home world then. It could be the zealots who want to kill everything and bring back the return of the Great Serpent versus the more rational theological types who just want to stay hidden and worship the Great Serpent in their own way. And while we don't know where Anasco sits in all of this, it would make sense given the faction's history that he would want to be more peaceful, and so he could easily have been ousted from within House Var'uun, either by zealots or some other villain. Maybe the most intriguing and unexpected aspect of the trailer is this image of what seems to be dozens of stasis pods containing some sort of humanoids. The placement of this shot just before the title card tells us this is probably a substantially important revelation within the story. So what's actually going on here? If they are indeed stasis or cryopods, it would not be a first for Bethesda, but it would be a first for Starfield as far as I'm aware. There are several abandoned cryolabs in the game, but I personally don't remember encountering this specific tech anywhere. I thought for a while that cryopods must be in the game, but I can't for the life of me think of a single example. It certainly would fit though, and it feels odd that there aren't any cryopods in the rest of the game. Bearing in mind that Jinan var'uun encountered the Great Serpent as a passenger on a colony ship, there's every chance that that is the ship we're looking at here. This could very well be an experimental cryostasis ship designed to transport hundreds of passengers to a new planet somewhere in the far reaches of space. We know very little of Jinan var'uun's ship or what happened to it after all, but it would be strange if this was the only example of cryostasis pods in the game. We do know, however, that cloning is present in a few places in Starfield. There's Operation Starseed and the historical clones for a start, though the pods you can find in that quest don't look a lot like the ones here. And there's Hadrian Sanon too, of course, who was apparently cloned from Vae Victis. But if they are clones here, then who would they be clones of? Jinan var'uun is the most likely candidate, and it would certainly be fun to fight 100 clones of him, but I'm not convinced that makes a lot of sense. The figures in these pods look similar to the ghostly figures we've seen too, and not normal bodies. My best guess, while trying to link these pods back to what we know of the story for certain, is that these are the pods that were present on Jinan's colony ship, which have been repurposed as part of whatever experimentation is going on with artifacts or cosmic matter to reach out to the Great Serpent. Or something like that. Obviously, looking forward to Shattered Space, we're still left with a lot of questions without any sort of obvious answers. The one question I'd probably most like an answer to before playing would be whether or not this expansion will be directly tied to the main story. I'm not sure I really want it to, and I hope instead that it's a self-contained adventure with an emphasis on replayability. But if it is going to connect to the main Constellation quest, then I hope at the very least that it provides us with a few more answers. So, bearing in mind everything we know about House var'uun from the base game, and all the details we can gather from this brief trailer, what do we know for sure about Shattered Space? Not that much, honestly. We know that we're going to be exploring House var'uun's homeworld, and resolving some sort of conflict with their leadership, while also facing some new cosmic threat. It's pretty exciting, really, just how little we know about this expansion. And I hope that some of these theories and suggestions only make you more excited for Shattered Space. I'll mention briefly too that I'm glad to see Creations finally launch in Starfield, but a lot of my concerns from my previous video still remain. And I think I need to sit with the whole system for a while before I can say for sure whether I think it's working entirely in Starfield's favour. At first glance though, I think it's really interesting that free mods and paid mods are tied together with this system on console, but I'm glad that this means there are still plenty of free mods available. The paid Bethesda created content definitely seems a bit pricey, but the community created mods are at least a bit more reasonable. Bethesda offering a whole new quest here in Creations is pretty interesting too. For now, I'm not wholly convinced by the way Creations is set up, but I'll see how I feel down the line. But anyway, what did you think of the Shattered Space trailer, and what did you spot there that I didn't? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe if you'd like to hear me talk about more video game stuff. And by the way, if you like this t-shirt, it's one that I designed and have for sale along with a few others. If you're interested, there'll be links available. Otherwise, I'll see you next time around.